morning. Many of you know I'm not a regular minister, but here I am. The opening words for the service are from Reverend Julio Soto, to the people who may have mistaken freedom for liberation. To be free, you must embrace the breadth of your own existence, without apology, even if you try to take it from you. They try to take it from you. You must know, not that you can do whatever you want. You are not a kudzu vine, eating entire hillsides for the purpose of feeding your own lush life. You must know instead that inside you are an entire universe, milky blue, magenta, and gold, expanding like the universe. But to actually be free, you must know and you must fight for the entire universe's inside of everybody else. Being free is not a license, but it's a promise. And now we'll light our chalice with the hopes that all people will one day be free, and a reminder that none of us is really free until all of us are free. Chalice, sir. Our opening hymn is number 34 in your gray or cloth-bound hymnal. Though I may speak with the bravest fire, please rise as you're able, in body and spirit, Holy Spirit.
So welcome to First Parish in Bedford, a Unitarian Universalist congregation where we come together every week as a people with diverse beliefs and a shared commitment to bring more peace, love, and justice into the world. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whether you worship one God, many gods, or no God, you are welcome here. I am the Reverend Jamie Hanson-Rieger, Ron Greene is our worship associate today, and of course we have the incomparable Steve Sussman on the piano. Happy Memorial Day weekend. We are so glad you are here with us today on this beautiful Sunday morning. I want to say a special welcome to our visitors this morning in person or out in the Zoomosphere. Here in the sanctuary, you are invited to fill out a blue connection card, which you will find lining the pews. You can fill it out, give it to one of the ushers during the offertory. We'll add you to our mailing list so you can be informed about the goings-ons here at First Parish. In Zoom, we'll put a link in the chat. You can click that link, fill out a virtual connection card. Parents and caregivers of little ones, there is a nursery available downstairs for your convenience. Of course, we're always delighted to have our littlest UUs right here in the sanctuary with us as well. I want to just note a change to the usual order of service. We're doing something a little bit new today. The time for sharing of joys and sorrows, we will be having it today, but it'll be happening closer to the end of the service, so look for that. And after the service, there will be coffee and tea and fellowship in the common room. Just a reminder, we have an official designated Make a New Friend table. So if you see someone sitting at that table who you don't know or don't know well, you might say hi and make a new friend. There's also a quiet space upstairs in room 201 for people who want to gather more quietly. There's coffee in that room as well. A few announcements today. There are 2 events coming up that we would love for you to be a part of and that we could also use a little bit of help for. The first is on Sunday, June 9th. That is when the Bedford Pride celebration happens on the Common at 2 p.m. after our annual meeting. We will have a First Parish table at the event. We have myself plus 1 volunteer enlisted so far. It would be great to have a few more people to help run it, help us procure swag, plan activities, and so on. You can email me at minister@uubedford.org if you would like to volunteer. The second event is a Juneteenth ceremony that is being planned, that is proposed for Sunday, June 16th at 2 p.m. But we can adjust that date and time still if another works better, especially since the 16th is also Father's Day, but we have the 16th in mind. For the Juneteenth ceremony, we will gather on the steps of the church by the Commons. We'll say a few words, and then we'll process to the old burial ground where we put flowers on the monument for the black freedmen who fought in the Revolution. It's going to be a beautiful ceremony. We would love to have a few more people help plan and lead that event. And again, you can email me. And finally, don't forget, please, that June 9th is our flower celebration service and our annual meeting. So bring flowers to share in the service and then plan to stick around for the pure exhilaration of democracy in action. Now, if you will please rise again, we will share our unison affirmation, which is also in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en espíritu de amor, y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. Our story for all ages today is called How Anna Won the Argument. One bad year in a faraway land, there was a terrible drought. A drought is a time when there is no rain. And so that summer, the soil grew hard and dusty, and the crops withered under the sun, and very little food grew for the people, and they were hungry. They harvested what they could, and in the spring, they planted their few seeds in the dry soil, and they hoped for a better harvest next year. Well, the next summer, it was the exact opposite from the year before. It rained and rained all summer long. The rain flooded the fields, drowned the crops, and because the ground was so hard, the rain caused terrible floods that swept away the people's homes. And the people grew hungrier, but they did what they could to rebuild their homes, and they planted the few seeds they had, and they hoped for a better year next year. But the next year there was a terrible war, and some men from another land came and they set fire to the fields. What little they had grown was all burned up, and the houses they had rebuilt were burned up too, and many of the people realized that they could not stay there any longer. A woman in the village named Mira also decided that she would leave. She gathered up what few possessions she had. She gathered her 2 young children. She called for their little dog, Barcus Aurelius, and they all began to walk north. Mira had heard there was food in the land of the north and that they could make a safe home there. It was a long walk for Mira and her little children. The sun was hot during the day, and at night they slept under the sky on thin blankets with Barcus curled up beside them, the ground hard and uncomfortable. They didn't have much food, but they walked for days and days, Mira and her children. They walked north toward hope. Mira sang songs as they walked and told silly stories to keep her children smiling and laughing, even as they walked for so long. Sometimes Barcus would run in circles beside them or chase after sticks because he was a good boy. But still, it was hard. One evening, after they'd been walking for many days, Mira saw a light in the distance. It was a rainy night, and by now she and her children were cold and wet and hungry. Even Barcus's tail and ears had begun to droop, and the children were taking turns carrying him because his little dog legs were tired. Well, the light, it turned out, was the twinkling of candles and a warm fireplace seen through the window of a humble cottage. This was the first home they had encountered in many, many days. And gathering up all of her courage, Mira led her children up to the cottage, and she knocked on the door. And a man with a gray beard opened it. Mira could see inside the house. There were very few possessions, but it was neat and it was clean and warm, and Mira could smell a pot of soup bubbling on the stove. "What do you want?" said the man suspiciously, staring at Mira and her 2 children. "Please, good sir," said Mira, "my children and I have walked for many days from our land where there is no food, and we are cold and wet and hungry. Can we shelter here for 1 night?" And the man said, "We have no room for strangers here." And he began to close the door. Now, as it happens, the man's wife and daughter were also in the house, and his wife began to argue. First, she said, "For goodness sakes, we can't leave them out in the rain." The man said, "We don't know them. They could be robbers." The wife snorted. "They don't look much like robbers." The daughter, whose name was Anna, began to say, "Papa, you taught me," but the man and the wife said, "Anna, hush." And the man said, "If we let them in, how do we know they won't let others in while we're asleep? Maybe the robbers are just waiting for them to get inside and open the door." And Anna said, "Papa, you taught," at the man and the wife said, "Anna, hush." But now the wife looked worried. She said, "Well, give them some food at least." And the man said, "If we give them some food, they'll tell others, and before you know it, the whole countryside will be knocking on our door. We can't feed the whole world." And Anna began again, "Papa, you said," but the man and the wife said, "Anna, hush." And they continued to argue. And while the couple argued, Anna went very quietly to a window at the back of the room. She opened it. She let herself out of the cottage. She lowered herself onto the wet ground. The man and the wife didn't see her. They were too busy arguing. And Anna then snuck around to the front of the house. So finally, the man turned back to Mira and her children, still standing outside in the rain. "We have nothing for you here," he said, and he began to close the door. But then, to his surprise, he saw his daughter Anna standing in the rain beside them, shivering in the cold. She was holding their little dog, Barcus Aurelius, in her arms. "Anna," her dad said angrily, "put that dog down. Come inside this house." And Anna said, "Papa, you taught me we are supposed to care for our neighbors as we care for ourselves. So if you're going to shut that door on them, you must shut the door on me as well. There is only one way I am coming inside." Looking at his daughter, trembling with the wet and cold, the man became very ashamed of his behavior, and he opened the door for Mira and her children. Anna and Barkus came in with them. That night they shared bread and soup inside the warm home, and there was enough for everyone. There was even a bone for Barkus. That is our story. Thank you for sharing it with me today. We're going to sing the children out to their religious education classes in the Overlook Room. The song is Jason Shelton's Children's Blessing.
A few months ago, I asked Jamie for a few minutes the opportunity to speak, to share a few thoughts about today, our long weekend. This is Memorial Day weekend. We learned about Memorial Day in our early years. We learned it was a special time to honor the sailors and the soldiers who had lost their lives while serving in the military, who died while in the uniform of the United States. The concept of the day was born in 1866, acknowledging the grief and anguish of the wives and mothers who had lost their sons. And admittedly, there were daughters, but there were mostly, by and large, 350,000 American soldiers. The ritual of placing flowers on the graves of war's victims expanded across the country, eventually joining the list of official holidays recognized by the government. It was a day off. Now, some of us here in this building know the pain of mourning a fallen father, perhaps lost in Korea, or a brother who died in Vietnam, or even a son who died in Iraq. Generation after generation is called for service in one place or another. For some, his loss might be the faint recollection of a family member telling the story of a soldier who had died 60 years ago. For others, the memories are far, far closer. Let me tell you about somebody who died. Bob Ahern was a friend of mine in college. Our girlfriends lived in the same dorm, and often, after saying goodbye to Karen or Barbara, we would walk to our dorms and just opining about this, that, or the other thing about. Bob was very involved in student life. He was very well regarded as a member of our small class in a small college. He was, in fact, elected to student government as our student rep for the class of 1964. Re-elected 3 years in a row. Nobody does that. Long-term member of the tennis team, a standout on the debate team, announcer at football and basketball games, and on the dean's list. And I faced him many times in intramural sports such as basketball or football. He was a mensch, on his way to a standout career to whatever field he chose. His choice led him to Columbia Law School, where I am sure he did well. No need to remind ourselves that the year 1967 was a period of growing opposition to the war in Vietnam. And by this time, Bob was in the final semester, his 3rd year of law school. The draft board of Laconia, New Hampshire, called him and said, really, you ought to join the Army instead of doing what you wanted to. Friends close to him had advised that there were several ways to avoid the draft. The National Guard, or signing up for a reserve group for Marines in Brooklyn. Well, Bob took another path. He actually passed his physical and was away to the Army, not as an officer in the legal branch of the Army, which he probably could have done very easily, but as an infantryman. The quickest way to fulfill his obligation, only 2 years. Well, you know where the story goes. He was off to Vietnam, and there he died. A man with all the intelligence, personality, and interpersonal skills in the state, personal skills, who should have been running for a Senate seat, or maybe governor in the state of New Hampshire. He died of a mortar round. He was a company clerk, a sergeant in a company of canine support, the dogs that would go out and scout for landmines or ambushes ahead of a patrol. Honoring the Army tradition, his company named one of their company buildings for him, killed in service. They named the kennel for Bob Ahern. Now, a few of you may remember the name of Bob Ahern from a memorial service I was involved with over 20 years ago. At the time, the nation was engaged in some sort of military adventure. Members of the congregation were called upon to speak about their relatives who had been killed in the service somewhere, and we had appropriate poetry. They shared their grief and encouraged us to actively work for war as a last possible alternative for solving problems. Let's not have other sons, daughters, mothers or sisters, fathers die in senseless wars. So on this Memorial Day, let us pause for a minute of silent reflection on those who did not return from the military. Those returning from war forever changed, and those lost even in senseless terrorist attacks, being part of an army that they didn't even know they were in. Let us just pause for a minute and think about our lost brothers and sisters. This Memorial Day, I give thanks we're not engaged in any prolonged or costly war. May it be so until the sun no longer shines.
Thank you, Ron. We're going to take an offering now to support the ongoing life of this community of memory and connection and service. In a moment, please, Steve will play some music and the ushers will come around. We invite you to give generously as you are able. The offering will now be taken. May it be joyfully given. We acknowledge on this Memorial Day the sacrifices of all those who have served. And let us hold in our hearts and in blessed memory, especially those who made the ultimate sacrifice in the service of our country. And may their loved ones also never be forgotten and held in the circles of care and connection. This is my last full sermon before the fall break, as it turns out. We have 2 all-ages services still yet to happen in June, and then we will transition to our summer worship offerings, which will go a little bit different. You'll hear more about that in the coming weeks. We have some exciting things happening this summer, which we'll announce in a little bit. And by the time I preach to you again in August, we will have had our annual Unitarian Universalist General Assembly, our fabulous annual gathering of UUs from around the country. 7 delegates from First Parish will be attending that assembly, and they and we will have voted on the proposed changes to Article 2, otherwise known as the 7 Principles, which changes we have been talking about all year. And after that vote, we will have some new language for ourselves, or we won't. Whichever way the vote goes, some people will be very happy, and some people will be very upset, and maybe most people will just be glad that we are done talking about things, right? So we can get back to doing. Deeds, not creeds, is the unofficial motto of Unitarian Universalism, right? Words are not supposed to be the point. Kindness is the point. Compassion is. Community, service, celebration, music, singing, learning, snacks, right? Things that matter. Changing the world, changing ourselves. Love is the spirit of this church, we say, and service is its law. The word love is reportedly the single most commonly used word in our hymnals. And yet also the word love appears nowhere in the current 7 principles. And so the proposed changes most significantly place love at the center of our shared values. Love is at the center, would be, for better or worse, the watchword of Unitarian Universalism if the changes pass. And it can also be the watchword if the changes don't pass. Because we can do whatever we want with what we have learned about ourselves from all of these conversations that we've been having for multiple years now. And likewise, no one is going to come around to all of the churches and take down the framed 7 Principles posters off of our walls if the vote passes, right? The principles will still be there, informing our understanding of ourselves. Just like we still say the Blake Covenant every Sunday, the Blake Covenant that begins, "Love is the spirit of this church." That covenant originated in a church in Illinois in 1894. And it spread to many, many other UU churches by acclamation, by popular adoption, and it isn't going anywhere. And it's a little interesting that the new language, the proposed language, if it is adopted, would be saying something that we've already been saying since 1894. Love is the spirit of this church. Love is at the center. So what does it matter, this idea that love is at the center? So I want to share a story by the Reverend Rebecca Parker, formerly president of the Star King School for Ministry, one of our 2 UU seminaries, the West Coast Seminary. Rebecca Parker wrote an essay called "Not Somewhere Else But Here," and this is an excerpt from that essay. In 1976, she begins, "I was on a cross-country road trip on my way to seminary. I traveled with a friend. We had time, so we decided to take back roads, and one afternoon, the road passed through rural western Pennsylvania. Late in the day," she continues, "we came down through hill country into a valley. It'd been raining hard, and as we neared a small town, we noticed blinking yellow lights warning of danger. We saw fields covered in standing water. We passed several side roads blocked off with signs saying road closed. Looks like they've had a flood here, we said. Coming into town, we crossed a bridge over a wide river. The water was high, muddy, flowing fast. Sandbags lined the roadway. Gosh, we said, they must have had quite a bit of high water to contend with. Looks like this was a major flood. We headed out of town, she continues, following a winding country road, captivated by the evidence all around us that there had been a dramatic flood. Then we rounded a bend, and in front of us, a sheet of water covered the roadway. The water was rising fast, like a huge silver balloon being inflated before our eyes. We stopped and started to turn the car around, and the water was rising behind us as well. And suddenly we realized the flood hadn't happened yesterday or last week. It was happening here and now. Dry ground was disappearing fast. We hurriedly clambered out of the car and scrambled to higher ground. Soaked to the bone, we huddled under a fir tree. No longer were we lodged in our familiar vehicle. The cold water of the storm poured down on us, baptized us into the present from which we had been insulated by our car and by our misjudgments about the country we were traveling through. End of her essay. So, as I said, my next sermon will be August 25th, my next sermon proper, 3 whole months from now. And it is very hard to guess what we will be wanting and needing to talk about 3 months from now, because it feels like the floodwaters are rising fast. Whether we're talking about literal floods like the kind that come with accelerating climate change, maybe we're thinking of intensifying socio-political challenges like the creeping authoritarianism that feels more like galloping authoritarianism these days, those rising waters. Maybe the rising waters feel like the rising violence and instability in the world, with attendant outbursts of social unrest and wars and rumors of wars. Maybe the image of the rising floodwaters calls to mind mass migration, the accelerating displacement of peoples around the world, which climate change and war and instability are only making worse, right? So maybe we think of refugees sleeping on the floor of Logan Airport or sheltering in our Bedford hotel. Maybe the rising waters make us think of the challenges our institutions are facing. Say, a church, just to randomly pick an example of an institution, and the ways a church might need to adjust and adapt in order to stay relevant in this time of sweeping social transformation, that sweeping social transformation that is sweeping some institutions away. So wherever we look these days, the pace of change is bewildering. The waters are moving swiftly. And not all change is bad, of course, right? Challenges can be met and overcome. Creative opportunities certainly abound. We are a resilient and inventive people. And yet, still, this is certainly a time when all of us should be keeping an eye on the horizon, because the waters are rising fast. And in times like these, when it is hard to know what the future, even the near future, might bring, it can be difficult to plan. Not that we won't try. Your parish board, for example, will be embarking on a number of planning projects next year. We're going to be looking at 5-year plans for the care of our facilities, for our staffing, for our financing. I love this. I love a good plan. We've come out of a lot of instability and transition as a congregation, and we have come through very well. You have come through very well. We're in a good place. And so this is a great time to reset, to take stock, to make a plan. And I trust that we will make a bold plan, because this is a bold congregation with a bold history, and great things are on the horizon for us. And similarly, when we hire our new director of faith development for children, they'll work with Reverend Annie, your minister of faith development, And they're going to map out a comprehensive religious education curriculum going from preschool to high school. So families can see the full path of programming that they will be moving along together as they grow up with this congregation, right? So families can see what is the plan. That's something you have asked for, and this is a great time to do it. And we have a chance to imagine something brilliant together. There are challenges, of course, and creative opportunities abound, and it's exciting. So we'll read the landscape as best we can, and we will plan to the very best of our ability, and life will happen. The waters around us will move as they will move, and we'll see. When it is difficult to plan, I am a big believer that you can still prepare. When it is hard to plan, you can still prepare. This church puts money into various reserve funds every year to prepare for unexpected expenses that come up or to take advantage of unexpected opportunities. We can build up other kinds of reserves as well, right? Personally, we can build up spiritual reserves to help us face the unknown challenges the rising waters will bring. Church is a place where we build up our spiritual reserves week after week. We can build up reserves of courage, reserves of kindness, of compassion. Right? We can stay faithful to our spiritual practices that help us stay grounded and resilient and rooted in our values when the ground is shifting underneath us, when we find that our footing is uncertain. We can strengthen the bonds of community within our congregation so we're meeting these challenges together. And we can especially attend to our multi-generational relationships so that we are leveraging our strengths and talents up and down the generational ladder. That is so important. And we can build and strengthen networks of relationships in the community around us. And especially we can do this with our fellow UUs. Right now, UU lay leaders are building learning communities to share knowledge and experience across congregations. UU churches are coming out of their silos and trying out new forms of collaboration. Organizations like UU Urban Ministry, UU Mass Action, UU The Vote are bringing UUs together across the state, across the country, to magnify the impact of our social justice work. So attending to our spiritual practices, building up our personal spiritual resilience, building community within the congregation, strengthening bonds outside of the congregation, right? Exercising our collaborative muscles. These are all ways of being prepared as individuals and as a community for the eventualities for which it is difficult to plan. And then beyond those things, this is how Unitarian Universalism counsels us to prepare. This is the North Star, the ground, the compass, the foundation for us as UUs. Put love at the center. Put love at the center. This is a poem by the Unitarian minister Robert Walsh, written in the aftermath of an earthquake. Okay? It's called Fault Lines. He wrote it after an earthquake. He wrote, "When the great plates slip and the earth shivers, and the flaw is seen to lie in what you trusted most, look not to more solidity, look not to weighty slabs of concrete poured, or the strength of cantilevered beam to save the fractured order. Trust more the tensile strands of love that bend and stretch to hold you in the web of life that's often torn but always healing. Trust more the tensile strands of love. There's your strength. The shifting plates, the rest of earth, your room, your precious life, they all proceed from love, the ground on which we walk together." Come what may, our faith tradition says, trust in the tensile strands of love. The waters rise, the ground shifts, trust in love. In the 1980s, before the creation of the modern 7 principles, UU minister David Rankin defined love as that which always seeks the welfare of others and never seeks to hurt or destroy. The Reverend Sierra Marie Garfau, in the new essay collection, Love at the Center, proposes a definition of love as leaning into interconnectedness in ways that are creative or generative. Leaning into interconnectedness in ways that are creative or generative. The Reverend Nancy MacDonald Ladd, in the same collection, says love is inherently relational. Love does not care what you believe, she says. Love cares how we can generate life-giving hope in concert with those around us. The Reverend Rebecca Parker, in that same collection, says love is a creative activity, a combination of elements that together yields a transformation. Love embraces the past through faithful covenant with the ancestors. Love looks to the future as people work to build a better world. And love finds immediate realization in the here and now among those who rejoice in the good that is found, embody compassion and kindness, and engage with what needs to be healed, mourned, or repaired right here, right now. I think that Reverend Julian Jamaica Soto, author of our opening words, gave us the most practical definition of love, one that harkens back to our Universalist roots when they said, all of us need all of us to make it. Or as they said in our opening words, you must know that inside of you there are entire universes expanding, and you must fight for the entire universes inside of everyone else. And that is quite a tall order. To know your own beauty, your own potential, your own generativity, to know the sacredness of your connection to the mystery of life, to know yourself as the locus of entire universes expanding and to fight for it, and then to fight for everyone else, including presumably the people who are fighting you. No one ever said this was an easy religion to follow. But that it is proposed is what it means to put love at the center in our Universalist tradition. No one is cut out of the circle of compassion and care. Everyone is offered life-giving hope. We fight for equity and justice for all, and then we engage in the work of healing and mourning and repairing. The Reverend Sophia Betancourt, president of our Unitarian Universalist Association, says we are grounded in a love ethic. Love is the single value most identified as the common commitment that we all share, whatever else our theological diversity. And so to claim love as the center, to put love at the center, is to understand ourselves not just as a liberal religion, but as a liberation religion. So, Unitarian Universalism has always been a species of what is known as liberal religion. And by that, it doesn't mean politically liberal. It means that Unitarian Universalism is rooted in the Enlightenment values of freedom, reason, and tolerance. Today we would say pluralism because tolerance sounds a little begrudging. I tolerate you. It doesn't sound very loving, right? So freedom, reason, and pluralism. To say we are a liberal religion means that UU embraces science and progress, democracy, individual rights, freedom of conscience, this thing we call modernity, right? And the 7 principles that we know and love are an expression of liberal religion par excellence. And now we are living in the postmodern world, and there are those who believe now, Unitarian Universalism will only have relevance in the postmodern world if we can come to understand ourselves not just as a form of liberal religion, but as a form of liberation religion. And the essence of a liberation religious movement is it understands itself as being in solidarity with the oppressed. A liberation religious movement understands itself as being in solidarity with those who are suffering, those who are marginalized, those who are targeted. And the Enlightenment trinity of freedom and reason and pluralism, they secure maximum liberty for the individual, pursuit of happiness, and the maximum liberty of the individual pursuit of spiritual development, those principles are like good fences for good neighbors. But they do not in and of themselves tell us to love our neighbor and to care for our neighbor as ourself. When love is at the center, we are challenged to see the suffering in our neighbor's eyes and claim it as our own. We are challenged to stand with the oppressed, and we are called into solidarity with the marginalized. And that love ethic has always been a part of Unitarian Universalism, as a vital thread running through our history, lived out imperfectly, of course, and often inspiring acts of remarkable courage and sacrifice and solidarity. People have risked and died for the promise at the heart of this tradition. It is who we are and who we have always been. And the proposition before us now is, this is the center, the very center of who we need to be. The proposition that is before us is, that thing that has inspired you to invite in the stranger, when the night was cold and resources were scarce and you did not know the risks, that thing that called you to invite them in anyway, that thing that has called us so many times before in our history to fight for the entire universe is inside everyone, that is the thing to lean into now, because the flood waters are rising. And that is what we will need to meet the challenges of the waters that are rising around us. This idea that love is at the center. And this is not a call to abandon liberalism, it is a call to imagine liberation, that all of us need all of us to make it. The love that lies at the center of this faith, says the Reverend Sophia Bedencourt, is the love that abides, and it is the love that expects nothing less of us than the rebuilding of this struggling world. So when next I preach to you again, we will have voted as a body to adopt the new language or not. And whatever we decide, we will remain the inheritors of a great tradition of reason and freedom and pluralism and love. And if we can trust the tensile strands of love, if we can ground ourselves in love, if we can keep love at the center, then in whatever circumstances we find ourselves, we will be prepared to face the rising waters, not as isolated individuals, but as a community, come what may. Closing hymn today is number 131, Love Will Guide Us. Please rise in body or spirit.
Hi, I'm Liz Connors, a member of the lay pastoral care team. And this is the time in our service when we share joys, concerns, or sorrows with each other. We ask that you keep your comments brief if possible. After we hear from those of us in the sanctuary, we will check in on Zoom. And I will be waiting here at the candle stand at the end of the service if someone wants to light a candle in private. And this final candle is to remember the joys, concerns, and sorrows that we hold in our hearts.
Let's close this time of sharing of joys and sorrows and our service with one of our beloved UU hymns, Spirit of Life, number 123 in your gray hymnal. Again, please rise in body or spirit. Our benediction today is another famous summation of the spirit of our tradition, this one by the Reverend Theodore Parker. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love. Happy Memorial Day, and go in peace.